Good morning. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us. So much to talk about today. We're going to do that with Phil Harriman and Betsy Sweet. Betsy at her home and Phil on the road somewhere across this great land, but he didn't want to miss the chance to talk about all the election results.
Couldn't miss it.
Good to see
Can't
you
miss
both.
this one.
The biggest story in politics for Maine this week has to be Senator Susan Collins winning a fifth term in the U.S. Senate. Every public poll, and I think most of the internal polls, showed a much, much tighter race against Sarah Gideon, but Collins ended up winning by about 8 points. Phil, how did she do it?
Well, like she has done from the beginning of her career in the U.S. Senate, she is definitely connected to Maine. She's responsive to her constituents, and she and I had a brief conversation on Wednesday, and she said that she put almost 7,000 miles on her bus, and she came across someone or some issue that she had been involved in. And I think that's what came through in the ballot box, that people recognized that she was doing her job and was an independent thinker, as Maine is.
Betsy, the Democrats nationally and in Maine put so much into this race, so much money, incredible amount. Clearly, that didn't move the needle.
No, I mean, I think that the whole strategy nationally, they spent, I think, $516 million on the 6 Senate races and didn't win one of them. I think the strategy of playing it safe, not talking about issues, trying to out-moderate the moderates was really not one that resonated with Maine people. You know, at a time of crisis, I think we have this, people want to know, how are you going to help me with healthcare? How are you going to deal with COVID? What are you going to do about the climate crisis? And to sort of not say what you believe and not lay out a plan and show a future that's different was a big mistake. I also think Bill Green put Susan Collins over the top.
Yeah, that's worth noting as well. Their campaign seemed to get a little rejuvenated when he started doing endorsement ads. And we remind everybody, Bill retired from here a year ago. So he was a private citizen. Yeah, but he had a lot of residual goodwill, just, I think, as Susan Collins did when people sat down to mark their ballots. They do know her and they know how she works. Another interesting race was, of course, Jared Golden, a Democrat. He's won his second term in Congress in Maine's 2nd District and did so by a comfortable margin, despite the fact that Donald Trump once again won the 2nd District by about 7 points, I think. What's the message out of that, Betsy?
You know, I think Jared he's done a great job as a congressman. I think he's been independent. He hasn't always gone the way of the Democratic Party, but I think Democratic leadership, I should say. But I think more importantly, he ran a positive campaign. You know, we did not see the venom, we did not see the vitriol in this campaign as we saw in the Senate campaign or in the presidential campaign. You know, he had very clever advertising, talking about what a kind of guy he was, and I think that made a huge difference. And I think that he, he plays both ends, and I'm not in a strategic way. I think he truly is representative of that district.
Phil, what happened with Dale Crafts? He had the endorsement of Paula Page, the endorsement of President Trump. That would seem to carry some weight in the 2nd District.
Yeah, at the end of the day, he didn't have the campaign finances and the infrastructure to get his message out. I actually think Dale Craft deserves a lot of credit for the support that he got. Many people expected Jared Golden to win this race by 20 points. It was relatively close for someone who was relatively unknown running up against an incumbent congressman.
We had record numbers of absentee and early voting in Maine, more than 500,000 early ballots. For one thing, that seemed to help things go a little more smoothly at the polls on a busy Election Day Tuesday. But Phil, do you think there's an appetite in Maine that more and more people are going to want to continue to vote this way?
Yeah, I actually think it was pretty easy for people to exercise their right to vote absentee or voting early. I think that trend will probably continue, but I also think there's a lot of people who want to make sure that before they go and vote, they know all there is to know about candidates, will choose to wait until Election Day rather than voting early and finding out later there's an issue or a circumstance about a candidate they voted for. Had they known, they would have voted for someone else.
What do you make of the early surge, Betsy?
I think it's a really good trend. I think that making it easier to vote is key to our democracy. And I think that people realize, to Phil's point, knowing more about the candidates, but when you have a ballot sitting in front of you and you can actually think about it and think about if there's questions on the ballot or candidates, you can think about it in the privacy of your own home, going to find that that's a growing trend. I also think for people who work on election day and can't get to the polls in time, for people who are elderly or have difficulty getting to the polls, it makes voting much more accessible to them. And there's a fascinating map if you overlay how easy it is to vote, early vote in states, and what the turnout was on the presidential, or what the result was in the presidential election.
We had no races that had to be decided by ranked choice voting this year. We expected the Senate race would probably go that way. It did not. Susan Collins squeaked out a win with over 50%. What is the impact of it this year, Betsy? Is it still useful?
I still think it's very important because it allows people, first of all, it changes who could get in the race. And it also allows people to really end the mental calculus of, oh, I really like this person, but I don't like this person, but they can't win, I like them. And look at Georgia right now. We have 2 Senate races, it looks like, that are going to go to a runoff in January. And had they had ranked choice voting, those races would be decided. By not having ranked choice voting, now they have to do more campaigning, spend more money. People have to go back out and vote. The number of voters will drop off. So I still think it's a critical method, and again, a critical way that we are going to increase our democracy.
What do you think, Phil?
I see it very differently. I can't tell you how many people reached out to me before the election to explain how the ranked choice voting process worked. It's made it more complicated. Frankly, it was supposed to get all the big money and all the vitriol out of the campaigns. That didn't happen. And just to our south in Massachusetts, they had an opportunity to adopt ranked choice voting, and Massachusetts residents soundly rejected it.
Another question a lot of people are asking these days, and I think it's, should there be some sort of national standard for how and how long votes are counted? Every state sets its own rules, and that's contributing to a lot of chaos, Phil.
Yeah, it is. But let's remember, we're not a democracy. We are a representative republic, and each state has the power to decide how to regulate their elections. I do think some uniformity through the state legislatures would help. But at the end of the day, each state has the power to decide how they're going to run their elections.
What do you think, Betsy?
I agree. I mean, I think that, I think this is a new thing. I mean, elections have very rarely been called on the night of unless there's a big landslide. And I think different states have different capacity to run it, how they run their votes, how they use their ballots, what kind of ballots machines they use. And so I think that if we did that nationwide, I think there'd be a big outcry about local control and states control because each state is different.
It's certainly worth noting that Maine and New Hampshire are among the states that do it really well every election cycle. And of course, part of it, I think that's contributed to that is that we allow processing of absentee ballots before election day.
Yeah, I think that would help across the board. There's no reason not to do that, I don't think.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Daily COVID-19 cases have been sadly spiking, setting records every single day over the last week or so, largely because of community transmission. So Governor Mills has expanded the mandate for people using masks both indoors and outdoors. Now, the Maine Republican Party weighed in on this, saying she's gone too far with this mandate and other restrictions. Betsy, should this be a political football the way it seems to be, and where does that come from?
No, it's absurd that it's become a political football. This is about people's health. We just have to look at the science, and we know that masks work. And I saw a great thing with it's all Swiss cheese. Masks works, washing your hands works, social distancing works. And if you put them, but then none of them work perfectly. But if you put them all together, we're in a better place. This is very disturbing for Maine because we don't really know why this is happening. Why we're moving into community transmission. So we were joking Tuesday night that you could tell who was waiting in line, who they were going to vote for by whether or not they were wearing a mask. Yeah. And I think that's it's ridiculous that this belongs in science and the public health arena, not in the political arena.
Phil?
Yeah, I think everyone that I cross paths with is very compliant with the washing hands and distancing and face masks, and to put more of that on, thinking that we're going to outsmart a virus that is contagious is simply not. The government can't regulate that out of the way. I think the incidence of infections rising was predicted by the healthcare professionals, and hopefully we're beginning to have the so-called herd immunity take shape in the weeks ahead.
All right, Betsy Sweet, Phil Harriman, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you for joining us as well on Political Brew. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.